Sartre's thesis is not simply the one about mauvaise foi, bad conscience, self-objectivization, in order to cover up the void of his or her subjectivity, a subject escapes into a firm symbolic identity. What Sartre shows is how, through the very exaggeration in his acting as a waiter, through his very over-identification with the role of the waiter in question signals his distance from this role and thus asserts his subjectivity. Thus, this French waiter plays at being a waiter by acting like an automaton, just as the role of the waiter, incidentally, in the United States is almost the opposite one, to play at acting like your friend, like, hi, my name is John, how are you today, and so on. However, Sartre's point is that whatever game the waiter is called upon to play, the ultimate rule that the waiter follows is that he must break the rules, and that he must do so by following them in an exaggerated manner. That is to say, the waiter does not simply follow the unwritten rules, which would be obedience to a certain kind of tyranny, but instead he goes overboard in following those rules. The waiter succeeds in rejecting the attempt to reduce him to nothing more than being a waiter, not by refusing the role, but by highlighting the fact that he is playing it to the point that he escapes it. The waiter does this by overdoing things, by doing too much. So I think it's crucial to get at what Sartre is aiming here, to also supplement this description with its symmetrical opposite. One is truly identified with one's social role, precisely when one does not over-identify with it. When one accompanies one's playing the role, following its rules, with small violations or idiosyncrasies destined to signal that beneath the role I'm playing, there is a real person who cannot be directly identified with the role. That's the true identification. Which is why, to let you know an obscene incident that happened to me recently, one of my publishers proposed me to do, you know, on the back cover of books, you usually have the description, writer here does this, that, blah, blah, and then usually they add a line or two to give the personal touch. Like, in her free time, Miss Highsmith likes to grow tulips and takes care of her pets or whatever. So I said, okay, let's try the game here. So I proposed it, unfortunately, as you can see, like, in his free time, Professor Zizek surfs pornography, surfs the web for child pornography and teaches his son how to pull off legs from living spiders or something like this. Just to provoke, to show that precisely this false subjectivization is where you are caught into the game. Let me go now a step further. Sartre also draws attention to a crucial distinction between this kind of playing a role and a theatrical playing a role where the subject only imitates the gestures of a waiter for the amusement of spectators or as part of a stage performance. In clear opposition to the theatrical imitation, the waiter who plays being a waiter really is a waiter. As Sartre put it, the waiter realizes the condition of being a waiter, while an actor who plays a waiter on stage is irrealized in his role. In linguistic terms, one can say that what accounts for this difference is the performative status of my acts. In the case of an actor, the performative efficiency is suspended. And I claim a psychotic is precisely the one who doesn't see, or rather doesn't feel, this difference. For him, both the real waiter and the actor playing, being a waiter in a theater, are both just playing the role. Now, I want to elaborate a little bit more, because this will bring us, I claim, to racism, sexism, symbolic violence. I want to elaborate the distinction between these two types of playing the role. In Lacanian, but by far not only Lacanian terms, this distinction is the one between simulacrum and appearance proper. Simulacrum operates on the axis between the imaginary and the real. It tries to reproduce reality at the imaginary level to such a degree that it becomes, for our experience, indistinguishable, the reproduction from proper reality. Exemplary simulacra are not only the realistic digital recreations of reality, but also products on today's market deprived of their malignant property. Coffee without caffeine, cream without fat, beer without alcohol, which all look and taste like it without being it. According to a recent report, a slow, brief slip into vulgarity, I read on Reuters that scientists in a laboratory in Venezuela added a further element to this series. Through genetic manipulations, so it was proudly announced, they succeeded in growing beans which, upon consumption do not generate the bad-smelling and socially embarrassing winds. So after decaf coffee, fat-free cakes, diet cola, alcohol-free beer, we get now wind-free beans. Okay, whatever. Now, appearance proper is, however, something entirely different. It operates at the properly symbolic level. Exemplary of symbolic appearance is, of course, the enigmatic status of what we call politeness. When, upon meeting an acquaintance, I say, "Glad to see you, how are you today?" It is clear to both of us that in a way I do not mean it seriously. If my partner suspects that I am really interested in how he is, he may even be unpleasantly surprised, as though I were aiming at something too intimate, of no concern to me. However, it would nonetheless be wrong to designate my act as simply hypocritical, since, in another way, I do mean it. The polite exchange does establish a kind of pact between the two of us. This brings us to another possible definition of a madman, the subject who is unable to enter this logic of sincere lies, so that when, say, a friend greets him, "Nice to see you, how are you?" he explodes, "Are you really glad to see me, or are you just pretending? And who gave you the right to probe into my state?" and so on and so on. Such a sincere lie is appearance at its purest. And contrary to the doxa, it is this symbolic appearance, not reality, which is threatened in today's reign of simulacra. Furthermore, this structure of appearance accounts for at least one dimension. We will see later there are other dimensions of symbolic violence. That is to say, appearance proper exerts what one usually refers to as performative power, or what Claude Lévi-Strauss called symbolic efficiency, efficacité symbolique. In a way, you are what you appear to be. That is to say, your symbolic identity determines your position in social reality. Let me explain this point with a maybe surprising reference. Okay, I could have taken many examples from Judith Butler's work, because it's obvious that I think that here there is at least a partial overlapping between my work and her work. But let me go to, for obvious reasons which concern the politically incorrect borders of racism, to Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote apropos the United States racism against the blacks in the late 40s, when she for the first time visited the United States, how, quote from Beauvoir, "Many racists, ignoring the rigors of science, insist on declaring that even if the psychological reasons haven't been established, the fact is that blacks are inferior. You only have to travel through America to be convinced of it." End of quote. Now, it's interesting how many feminist or post-colonial anti-racist readers, commentators misunderstood here Beauvoir's point. For example, Stella Sanford, in her recent book, How to Read Beauvoir, claims that, quote, "Nothing justifies Beauvoir's acceptance of the fact of this inferiority of the blacks with regard to whites." Brief quote from Stella Sanford. "With her existentialist philosophical framework, we might rather have expected Beauvoir to talk about the interpretation of existing physiological differences in terms of inferiority and superiority, or to point out the mistake involved in the use of the value judgments inferior and superior to name alleged properties of human beings, as if to confirm a given fact." End of quote.